hoping I can help you thrive on a few good stories. And we've got another one today coming right out of our book, African Americans, Voices of Triumph. All right. So it took me a while to come up with this today. Hence, I'm running a little behind schedule. I wanted to do something. I wanted to go to Ethiopia, but I'm not ready to go to Ethiopia yet. But hopefully we will get there. Meanwhile, we're going to continue on with the story of the Buffalo Soldiers, guardians of the frontier. Before we get there, let's go ahead and read our proverb of the day. Proverb of the day: a fool looks for dung where the cow has never browsed. A fool looks for dung where the cow has never browsed. So, I think you can see the sense. Certainly, nobody should have to explain that to you. And that is a proverb from Ethiopia. A fool looks for dung where the cow has never browsed. Now, our poem today is another original by me. And the one that I'm going to read today, it's a short one. And it's just simply entitled, Ignorance is Bliss. Ignorance is bliss. So let's see what did I have to say about ignorance and bliss. Ignorance is bliss. I'm absolutely sure of this. Lemmings don't know what happens when they reach the bottom of a cliff. Happily they go over the top without a stop. By the time they reach bottom, they're in heavenly bliss. Hamlin had rats who followed a piper right over a cliff, but he wouldn't be done until he'd taken your daughter and your son. We've got one too who dances to the YMCA tune and acts like a loon. That's kind of a social commentary. All right. Don't usually engage in social commentary at this time, but as it turns out, ignorance is bliss. So that's how I got to this. Meanwhile, let's eradicate some ignorance about the Buffalo Soldiers. Who are they? Why are they? Where did they exist? And what was their purpose in life? So the Buffalo Soldiers came out of a desire of Black folks to become one with the United States of America, to become full citizens of the United States of America with full rights and privileges. That has been a struggle Black folks have been fighting since we first got here, for those rights and privileges of citizenship. And at every single turn, every single corner, it's been denied on numerous occasions in a number of different ways, all the way up until and including today, because we're still dealing with this whole voter suppression thing, which I won't go into because that's a whole nother story. But in the meanwhile, it's something we've been fighting for. So during the Civil War, the Union, being led by President Lincoln, did not want to enlist any Black men in the armed forces. They said no. Black men we offered our help, we offered our assistance, but we were told a simple no thank you. We can do this on our own. We got this. Apparently they didn't have it at all. And they first learned about how much they didn't have it at the very first Battle of Manassas, where they got routed by the Rebs. Rebs cleaned their clock on that day. And my family was there because it happened right in our front yard, literally, because we had a house right there on the battlefield of Manassas, all the way up to the year 1993 or so. So the Rebs routed the Union soldiers. Well, what were the Rebs willing to do? They were willing to do what the North wasn't willing to do. The Rebs were willing to put black folks to work on their side of the equation because they knew they were at a deficit. They needed as much help as they could get from all quarters. So now you read these stories about these black Rebs and black Confederates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was only because the Rebs were taking help from all quarters, including, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from the French. The French were giving aid and comfort to the enemy as well, because they saw it was an opportunity to regain some of the land, the colonies, the wealth that they had lost in Haiti earlier on, as well as right here on this piece of land. So there were a lot of different factors that came into play. First and foremost being that black folks wanted to be full citizens. And Frederick Douglass was at the forefront of that fighting to have black men be able to enlist in the armed forces and put our lives on the line. So let's see how that story went. It all starts in terms of the part after the Civil War. That's when the Buffalo Soldiers were formed. They weren't formed until after the Civil War, but the model that was used was the model that Frederick Douglass helped them establish during the Civil War, which was to allow black folks finally to engage in armed combat against the Rebs, but only in segregated units, and to always led by a white officer, So now we're going to read here about the Buffalo Soldiers, continues that story of black men fighting for our freedom with arms, okay? Using arms to fight for our freedom. But in this case, it's the Buffalo Soldiers, and the time period is 1866. So right after the war ended, September 21st, the first unit of the Buffalo Soldiers was formed, and it's known as the 10th Cavalry. So that lets you know right there, these men were on horses. And that brings us all the way around to our theme for this week, which is African adventures on horseback, because they went all over the West on their little venture. So, and they used not only horses, they also used donkeys, bicycles. They used a lot of different things, but in particular, we're primarily interested in those horses. So the Buffalo Soldiers, sentinels of the frontier. Within a year after the Civil War ended, the vast Union Army had disbanded. Its hundreds of thousands of veterans sent back home. Left in its place was a peacetime army of about 54,000 men that was about to become engaged in the Indian Wars of the Western frontier. Fully 1/5 of that thin line of Western soldiers were African Americans, taken into the army as regulars for the first time in the nation's history. Of the 35 permanent army regiments that evolved by 1869, 4 were all black units: the 9th and the 10th Cavalry, and the 24th and the 25th Infantry. They were stationed on the frontier and would remain mostly segregated from society for the better part of an entire century. These African American units would play a major role in developing the West, but their most important job for 25 years after the Civil War was to protect Americans from outlaws, Mexican revolutionaries, and especially Indians who were fighting for their homelands. The black troops came to be called Buffalo Soldiers by their Native American foes, a name of honor believed to have been inspired by the resemblance between their fighting spirit and that of the buffalo, or it could have been the hair and that part of the buffalo that goes right around their neck. Could have been that. Inspired by the resemblance between their fighting spirit and the spirit and that of the buffalo, revered by the Plains Indians for its strength and stamina. Of the total number of men who enlisted in the 4 Buffalo Soldier regiments, about 12,500 between 1866 and 1898, most reported for duty with little education and almost no experience. Nevertheless, within a few years, the black regiments boasted some of the Army's lowest desertion rates and highest re-enlistment rates. The regiments soon were manned almost completely by veterans, experienced in the terrain and the fierce fighting style of the Indians. The 24th and 25th Infantry ranged across the West. Their duties, if not glamorous, were demanding and important. They constructed military posts, opened roads, strung telegraph lines, laid railroads, tracked horse thieves and cattle rustlers, fended off Indian attacks, and guarded strategic points. The 9th Cavalry, established near New Orleans, headed for West Texas, a region fraught with conflict between American settlers, Comanche and Kiowa Indians, and the Mexicans. During the 9th service there, Sergeant Emmanuel Stantz of F Troop received the Medal of Honor, the first of 18 that would be awarded to Buffalo soldiers for bravery between 1869 and 1890. While leading a mission to find 2 whites who had been kidnapped during an Indian raid, the 9th also confronted Apache bands led by such indomitable chiefs as Victorio, Nana, Cochise, and Geronimo. The regiment was later transferred north, where it performed scout duty in Sioux country during the winter of 1890 and 91, when the Indian Wars came to an end. The 10th Cavalry was best known for its frequent confrontations with Cheyenne, Comanche, Kiowa, and Apache warriors. Organized at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and stationed in Kansas and Indian Territory, the 10th reported to its post in September 1867. It ran head-on into the Cheyenne when a 34-man scouting party was attacked by a force of 70 to 80 warriors. After 6 hours of battle, the soldiers only to be chased on horseback for 15 miles before reaching safety. In the same month, 60 Cheyenne attacked a small party of the 10th. The battle lasted 2 days, with only 2 civilian laborers killed and 1 soldier wounded. Among the 10th's later achievements was the rescue of about 50 scouts who had suffered heavy casualties and run out of rations while under siege by some 700 Indians on an island in the Republican River. The 10th also participated in the final capture of the great Apache chief, Geronimo. One of those serving in the 10th was Lieutenant Henry Ossian Flipper, who had endured cruel racism at West Point to become the first African-American graduate of the military academy in 1877. In 1878, Flipper was assigned to the 10th at Fort Sill in Indian Territory, the first black officer to serve in a Buffalo Soldier regiment. But in 1881, the young officer was court-martialed on a trumped-up charge lodged by white racist fellow officers that he had misused government funds. The trap was cunningly laid, Flipper wrote of his ordeal, and I was, quote-unquote, sacrificed. Flipper went on to have a distinguished career as a civil engineer. He died in 1940. In 1976, his case was reopened, the charges declared false, and he was awarded a posthumous honorable discharge. Indeed, prejudice and discrimination proved as daunting an enemy to the Buffalo Soldiers as the most brilliant Indian war chief. They routinely received third-rate equipment, horses rejected by white cavalry units, and terrible rations. White officers often refused to work with them, and the very people who depended on them for protection frequently treated them worse than they did the outlaws and the Indians. Despite the hardships, however, the record of the Buffalo Soldier regiments shines with distinction. After the Indian Wars, they formed the hard-fighting core of the American forces in Cuba during the Spanish-American War, and according to some sources, led the charge up San Juan Hill. These crack units were relegated to stateside non-combat duty in World War I, but they did get into World War II. That war saw an end to fighting on horseback, and the 9th and 10th Cavalry were deactivated in 1944. Their manpower, for the most part, distributed among units. The 25th Infantry, placed in the new all-black 93rd Division, was scattered when that division was broken up in 1944. The 24th Infantry carried the proud history of the Buffalo Soldiers into the Korean conflict, as did the 9th and 10th Cavalry, which were reactivated as tank battalions. All trace of the Buffalo Soldiers' organizational lineage passed into oblivion when the Army was desegregated in the early 1950s. So the way that we remember them now is mainly in the history book, because in the actual Army, they have been, what's the word for it? Deactivated. But here you can see the machine gun troop of the 10th Cavalry assembled for inspection at Fort Myer, Virginia, near Washington, D.C. in 1932. There goes a picture of that 10th Cavalry machine gun troop. Okay, so you can see these machine gunners. I don't know if they were gunning on top of the horse or if they had to get down off the horse and then use the gun. I'm not sure about that, but they were a force to be reckoned with. And in 1932, we're on the eve of World War II, because that was the first year, what is very early into the Depression that they always talk about, that economic downturn that the U.S. suffered and the world actually suffered during the early part of the 20th century. So I'm going to end right there, and tomorrow I'll pick up on the story of one of these Buffalo Soldiers. Now there's a number. It looks like there's more than one story here that I could tell, but I'm going to tell that one, and maybe we'll get to talk somewhat about another person by the name of Allen Allensworth, who founded a black town. He was also a former Buffalo Soldier. So we could talk about him and the town that he founded. Let me see if I can find a good picture of him here, just for you to see what he looked like. There he goes there. Allen Allensworth. So before it was over with, there were some black officers in the U.S. Army back in the day. One of them was Colonel Allen Allensworth, named after Richard Allen, the preacher. The other one was Martin R. Delaney. He was also an officer in the U.S. Army and one of those Buffalo Soldiers, because as you know, I already stated, those units, the black units, were black people were in segregated units. There were no black people in integrated units all the way up until I think Truman was the one that finally outlawed or changed the rules to where all the units had to be desegregated. I believe it was Truman, either Truman or Eisenhower. It was right around in there. So right around the time of World War II. Okay. And so last but not least, I'll leave you with the color image of one of these Buffalo Soldiers apparently doing some tracking. You can see how hard he's looking down at the snow track, at the tracks in the snow. Yeah, he's following somebody. He's on the trail. And you can see he's all the way up there in those mountains, those snow-covered mountains. that they always talk about. So there's a lot of information out there about the Buffalo Soldiers. We even with whatever it is that we talk about tomorrow, we won't even be able to really tell the full story of the Buffalo Soldiers. Some of it's in some of these books that we have here, but there's a lot of their story that is untold and may remain so. But it's up to us to see what parts or portions of it we can dig up. It may be that you have some information up there in your attic, in your in a trunk or a box that you haven't opened, that came from a relative that passed on to the next world. So it's time for us to go ahead and go to work and do our due diligence, and that's what I'm gonna do right now, because Doc Ock is, my time is up. Doc Ock at noon and 9. We've already gone over my time. So for today, what I like y'all to do out there, it's the same thing as I've been asking you to do every other day. I haven't got the link up there yet, but I got a link I'm going to post up on Facebook, and I'll post it up. I don't think I can put it up on YouTube. I'll try to put it up on our website too, to the Amazon Smile link that will link you to an area, to a page that Amazon has where you can donate 1% of all the monies that you spend at Amazon to Black Facts Educational Research. It doesn't increase your bill. It doesn't change anything about how you do anything, except for one thing. You just need to go to the Amazon Smile page and sign in there, as opposed to going to your regular Amazon page. You're going to see the same exact products. You're going to see everything's going to stay the same. You'll still have your shopping cart there that you can put 600 items in, and leave them there forever. So everything will be the same. The only difference is that Amazon will donate 1% of what they earn off your purchases to Black Facts. And that's going to be really crucial, because this winter, you're going to be ordering, if you can, you're going to be ordering a lot of products on Amazon, because we're not going to be able to do all the shopping like we usually do. So if you could go ahead, look for that link, hit the button, sign up, we'd really appreciate it. Of course, you can always donate direct right below Facebook or at our webpage. You can hit the donation link over there at the top, and you go to a donation page. So you can always make direct donations as well. Our goal is still to raise $20,000. We've moved the date back to November 20, but we still need that money. We appreciate all the donations that people have given already. It's very much appreciated, very much needed, because we do have expenses over here. We can't bring all this good material to you, all this good research, without putting out some money for books, for all of these displays, these nice color displays that we use here. Okay, we make those all ourselves. We didn't buy those in a store. Okay, they don't just come automatically. These are products that we have to make ourselves. So we'd appreciate your assistance. In the meantime, peace out. Look for us again tonight. We'll be black at 9. This is Doc Ock at noon and 9, signing out. Peace out now.